Hello friends, today again I am before you with the answer of yesterday's question. Now yesterday we gave a question from socio-political philosophy. Now let us see what can be the answer for that. Now the question reads like, is liberty compatible with the imposition of reasonable restrictions? Discuss. Now in the questions where discuss is written, there basically you have to write what main question is asking, and then again we have to critically evaluate the whole thing, and then we have to finally conclude. And again, I'm repeating, in critical evaluation, we have to tell some criticisms, then some positive points, depending on what the idea or exposition we have already done, and then accordingly. Now, in philosophy questions or otherwise also, this is basically political science question. We have to definitely quote the political thinkers, their ideas in support of our argument. Uh, Again, in this question also, basically in this answer also, we are starting with uh, quite engaging line beginning, and in the end also, just like our yesterday's question, I'm just giving a few examples so that whenever you get the opportunity, you can definitely start with some engaging argument, some engaging question, some engaging quote of some philosopher uh, to begin or to end, depending on requirement. But it should not appear superfluous. That also you should know. I'm again cautioning you that overuse of these will definitely negative also. So you have to very balanced kind of use. So in some questions, some answers we can definitely use. So here also we will do like that. So now the question is liberty compatible with imposition of reasonable restrictions? Now this is 300-word question. So first we have to explain in general how liberty is compatible or incompatible with reasonable restrictions, and then we have to bring out Indian context also. We have to quote Indian Constitution provisions, we have to quote some Supreme Court cases, and then we have to see the critique of the whole argument, the other side of the argument, and then we have to try to conclude. So this is this kind of question. This we have to deal like that. So now let us see how it has been started. Can freedom survive its own excesses? So this is the question mark engaging line basically we have used. Can freedom survive, or can liberty survive its own excesses? In a democracy, liberty is essential, but not absolute. This is again important statement. The central challenge lies in balancing individual freedom with collective welfare through reasonable restrictions. So we are linking both of the question, liberty and reasonable restrictions. So central challenge lies in balancing individual freedom with collective welfare through reasonable restrictions. So on the one hand, we have to promote liberty in democracy. On the other hand, if we want to see the collective welfare, we have to also go for some reasonable restrictions. Now, this tension is the cornerstone of liberal political theory and constitutional jurisprudence. Some of you might have definitely, or almost all of you might have, while reading general studies, you will have constitution, you have read constitutional jurisprudence, some political science students might have read. So basically, wherever we talk of liberalism, democracy, or constitutionalism, these liberty and reasonable restrictions issue comes definitely. Excess of either is going to harm the other. So therefore, basically this question is dealing with that kind of tension basically. So that's what we have explained in the first paragraph. Now we'll quote some political thinkers and philosophers. John Stuart Mill, in On Liberty is his book, argued that liberty may be restricted only to prevent harm to others. That is harm principle he has given. Mill has given harm principle, that if liberty is harming somebody else, then it can be restricted. So basically, the simple issue is that if my liberty is harming your liberty, or my liberty is restricting your liberty, so therefore both the person's liberty has to be regulated and restricted. So this is harm principle basically. Then Berlin, another modern political science philosopher, and also in his book Two Concepts of Liberty, distinguishes between negative and positive liberty. This is very important concept of Berlin. It can be used in other questions also. So he says that some constraints are necessary for meaningful freedom, because positive liberty will come then only. Negative liberty is, yes, freedom from interference. But positive liberty is freedom to self-actualize, or if you Emerson's terms, capability principle. So basically, that kind of thing will come only when some reasonable constraints are or some meaningful constraints are imposed. So this is what Berlin's theory. Now we'll go to Indian Constitution. Under Article 19(2) of Indian Constitution, fundamental freedoms may be reasonably restricted in interest of sovereignty, public order, decency, or morality. So this is given in 19(2). 19(1), in Article 19(1), various freedoms have been enumerated, and in 19(2) it has been mentioned that yes, reasonable restrictions may be put in the interest of sovereignty, public order, decency, or morality. And who will decide whether restriction is reasonable or not? Courts will decide. High Court and Supreme Court, because they have given the authority to basically interpret the laws which are imposing laws or orders which are imposing reasonable restrictions. So whether the restrictions are reasonable or not is decided by court. Now, I mean, some court cases accordingly we have to quote now. State of Madras versus V0. This is the first case, I mean, quite early case of Supreme Court of India, held that restrictions must be guided by democratic reasonableness. So this is what first in 1950s only this court has given order. Then another case, Modern Dental College versus State of MP. The court adopted the proportionality test. Now, what is proportionality test? The restrictions may be legitimate, necessary, and the least restrictive means. So you cannot simply have restrictions straight away. You have to explain, and it should be least possible, in proportion. I mean, basically, least required restriction should be imposed. So that's what meaning. So yes, in some it more may be required, in some less may be required. So in that proportion it has to be imposed. This is what proportionality test as far as Modern Dental College versus State of MP in 2016 Supreme Court. Then another Supreme Court case, K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. This is 2017 case. Court declared that individual dignity and autonomy are central to constitutional liberty, and any restriction must pass test of legality, necessity, and proportionality. So these three principles they have given in this case, Supreme Court has enunciated that any restriction to be reasonable has to pass the tests of legality, necessity, and proportionality. So this is again very, very important as far as Supreme Court this thing. And all these are basically check to unreasonable restrictions which can be imposed in a democracy. Now we'll see some critiques what they have said about that. Now critics like Frederick Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, this is his book. Then Robert Nozick, Anarchy, State and Utopia, warn that vague or expansive restrictions can erode liberty and empower the state excessively. So basically, they are extreme libertarians. So they say that yes, be careful. Expansive restrictions or vague restrictions can definitely endanger liberty in a democracy. So one has to be careful. Now, Indian experiences with preventive detention, internet shutdowns, and protest restrictions underscore these dangers. So this is again, I mean, it is happening in India or it may happen elsewhere also. So there has to be reasonableness in restrictions. Yet, unregulated liberty risks anarchy. This is again a very important point. Because on the one hand, unregulated restrictions may lead one kind of problem, then unregulated liberty may lead another kind of problem. It may risk anarchy. The task is not to eliminate restrictions, but to anchor them in constitutional morality, judicial scrutiny, and democratic legitimacy. So constitutional morality, all of you know, in GS ethics paper, we keep on talking of constitutional morality. So constitutional morality, it has to support constitutional morality. Judicial scrutiny, of course, High Court and Supreme Court have to scrutinize the law and then approve that. Then democratic legitimacy. People also, I mean, in democracy, because it has to be enunciated by parliament in a democratic manner. So that also. In conclusion, liberty and reasonable restrictions are not opposite. They are interdependent. When rooted in principle, restraints becomes the very condition for liberty to endure and flourish. So this is a very good conclusion. So I just want to say our beginning and end, excellent, very good. So that kind of thing you can definitely try in some of the answers. because all it may not be possible because of word limits also, because of writing practice. You may not remember all the things, but definitely in some questions you can do that. So this completes the model answer for today's question. Now let us see what we will be taking tomorrow. Tomorrow question, as you know, will be from Western philosophy. Now question will be, discuss Descartes' methodic doubt. How does it lead to certain knowledge? So this is question. Discuss Descartes' methodic doubt. How does it lead to certain knowledge? Now this question we will be answering in about 300 words. First we will be discussing and then answering in about 300 words tomorrow. So thank you for watching today's video. We'll meet again tomorrow to discuss the answer for question from Western philosophy. Thank you one and all.